Hello, I am retired Lieutenant Colonel Reginald Bullock from the United States Air Force and the Air National Guard. Today, I would like to talk to transitioning military members, veterans, and their spouses about getting a job in the civilian sector. I know a lot of people who are doing that transition, who've made the transition, and sometimes you have to get a different job, another job. So I want to talk to you about a few things that may help you. When I was coming out of the military, nobody really prepared me to get out of the military and become a civilian and get a civilian job, except one person. And that person helped me with my resume, helped me to reinvent myself, etc. And I remember that. But there were no programs, there were no activities that I did while I was in the military that prepared me. And so I'm putting this together to be able to help someone, whether it be you or you could share this with someone else, so that as you make your transition out of the military into the civilian world, you have some tools that you can work with. So let's do this. Your service is your superpower. That's the title of my presentation. And the reason why I titled it that way is because so many people in the military have superpowers and they just don't even know. So by the end of this briefing, I'm hoping that you will learn what your superpowers are, you will embrace your superpowers, and you will use them to achieve your objective of getting a civilian job, a position, or maybe even starting your own company. So translating military excellence into civilian success is a different language. You know, there are people who speak languages out there, and there are folks who don't understand what they're saying. Even in the military, we have lots of languages, lots of acronyms. I'm going to say some acronyms throughout this presentation, and I'm not going to define the acronyms. You either know what they are or you don't. And if you find yourself confused, look it up. But at the same time, remember, this is how we speak in the military, and often civilians have no clue what we're saying. If I said Guten Tag, or Bonjour, or Assalamu Alaikum, or Como está, or Ni Hao, or any of those other languages, right? Some of you may have understood what I was saying, and some of you may not have understood what I was saying because it's a different language. What I want you to do is translate your military superpowers into that civilian language so that you can achieve your objective. So let's get started. Sit rep. Here's the sit rep. Recognize your value. Understanding why military experience is a competitive advantage, not just a background detail. Also, we're going to talk about how to translate your strengths. Learn to speak the language civilians and hiring managers actually understand and respond to. I get it. You're a professional. You're awesome. You're a hero. You're a veteran. But everybody doesn't understand your language. And your own story. All of us have a story. I may tell you one or two of my stories throughout this presentation, but what's your story? And so how do you walk into every interview, networking event, and conversation with clarity, confidence, and purpose so that they understand who you understand who you are, and you tell your story. And then build on your foundation. I don't know where you come from, and I don't know how many years you spent in the military, but it's part of your foundation. And you're continuing to build upon that. Your service was never your ceiling, right? I don't care if you did 30 years, 35 years, or 40 years in the military, or even 4 or 2. That wasn't your ceiling. That's your foundation. So hopefully, by the end of this presentation, you're going to leave with a challenge and tools to rise to your ceiling and beyond. So, who were you? Who were you versus who you became? Before you came in the military, who were you? And then after your time in the military, who did you become? So a military career doesn't just build skills, it builds identity. You entered a young recruit and emerged a leader. Many of you couldn't even spell leadership, let alone manager or supervisor. And think about where you are now. And you're a problem solver, mission executor. Every single person who's ever been in the military is a mission executor. That's who you became versus who you were. And that transformation is permanent. You are that person. You have those skill sets. But the uniform came off. However, the discipline didn't. You are disciplined to fold your garments in 6-inch squares and dress right, dress, parade rest, to the rear march, left face, right face, rep, front. All of these things you know, and you're disciplined to hear that. If I were in a room right now full of military people and somebody said, root, your discipline will hear that instantly and you will know what that means because it's a command. And then you execute. Civilians don't know that, but you do. So, who were you and who did you become? You know, you were a rank, a hierarchy. You were defined by your MOS, your AFSC, or your rate. You were bound by orders and structure. And you were evaluated on military metrics. But now, who did you become? So that's who you were. A proven leader under pressure, a complex problem solver, a mission-focused professional, a resilient, adaptable asset. You see what I just did there? I took military verbiage and turned it into civilian understanding. So who you were is on your bio, your military information, your annual performances, and that's who you were, and that speaks to the military and it speaks to the leadership of the military. But who you became is what the difference is. You're doing the same stuff, but who do you become as a civilian? So I want you to think through that translation because you're going to need to translate all of who you were to who you really are in civilian language. Mindset shift. Employers don't hire acronyms. We can recite acronyms. We can have a whole conversation in acronyms. They hire outcomes. And for you Army folks, I remember the first time I was around a whole group of Army, it was probably about 10 of them, and we were just huddling. And they spoke one word, but that word had 100 meanings. They said, hua, 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 hua. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? I'm Air Force, and I still didn't understand. So you need to be cognizant of your communication in the civilian world. They hire outcomes, though. They don't just hire, your ability. They want to know what can you achieve. And you can achieve a lot, and we're going to talk about that. Your military experience is definitely extraordinary, but only if you communicate it in terms that the civilians understand. This is the transition shift, the mindset shift that military people do have a hard time doing. Even though I'm telling you what you need to do, the execution of it is not easy. And so think about it. Your MOS, your rate, your AFSC, your designator, your codes, your rank, your abbreviations, and unit designations mean nothing to the hiring managers. To you, it's who you are. It's your presence, your authority. It's what you earned. But to them, I'm here to tell you, it means nothing because they don't understand all of that. What they're listening for is a simple, what did you accomplish? Remember when you had to write those action and result statements? This is the action and this is the result. That's what the civilians are looking for, your action and result statements, but it needs to be spoken in a language that they can understand. So what problems did you solve? Right? This is where those metrics come in. They can understand that if it's in civilian language. What changed because you were there? That's the so what, now what. In 2 of my books, I talk about so what, now what. And so you were there, you showed up, you served. All right, what changed as a result of you? Because whatever that thing you did was that caused the change, you may be able to do that for the organization, but they need to understand that in that language, not just I'm awesome because I was a colonel or I was a chief master sergeant or I was a petty officer. No, they need to understand what did you do? And so they don't just hire military experience, they hire the value military experience creates. And that value is worth something to them. But if they don't know what that value is, How do they know? If they don't know what that value is that you bring to the table, how do they know? So you need to move forward with this, and you need to understand how to communicate to the civilians so that they look at you and say, you're awesome. So let's talk about your superpowers. All right. You have these superpowers. You're good at this. You've been trained. You have the discipline, et cetera, et cetera. So one of your superpowers is you have leadership capabilities, not just in words, you've done it. So you led people through uncertainty, pressure, high stakes, right? And that doesn't disappear at separation. Just because you got out of the military doesn't mean you don't have these capabilities. You do. All military people do. Civilians just are not used to seeing it, so they don't understand it. So you have to communicate that. Adaptability, overcome, adapt, right? We have all of these things that we do that we take for granted, but you have this as a superpower. You know how to adapt. So you operate in environments where plans change by the hour, sometimes by the minute, and you adapt it and you execute it because you had to and you're trained to. These are your superpowers. Resilience. You bounce back from setbacks that would stop most careers and people cold in their tracks. You didn't have the option. You must be resilient. That's not a trait. It's a superpower. You have that superpower of resilience. And, not to slam civilians, but they've not been trained like you. They've not had to follow orders and have the discipline to execute, to be adaptable, to lead, to be resilient, no matter what. They had choices. They could say, no, I'm not doing that. Oh, that's not in my job description. No, you had to do it. And accountability. And so own your results, wins and failures. Hold yourself accountable. That's what you do. We don't just say my bad and chalk it up as if everybody's supposed to accept that. No. When you say my bad, or when someone says my bad, in my opinion, okay, that's an acknowledgement that you did something, but it's unacceptable that we stop there. No, you still need to not only hold yourself accountable, but what you going to do to solve that, fix that. It's your responsibility. It's your problem. It's your challenge. No, just my bad. No, I'm sorry. Unacceptable. So military people think like that. We have to achieve the mission. And we'll talk about this mission in a second, because that is your superpower. Think about it. You locked into every objective and didn't quit. When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems uphill, rest as you if you must, but don't you dare quit. Many of you heard that poem. We don't quit. We have a responsibility to the Constitution of the United States and to the national security strategy of the United States and the national defense strategy. It is not an option for us to quit. Why? Because millions and millions and millions of Americans and people all over the world are counting on us to do our job. That's your superpower. You are mission focused. You're going to get the job done, period. Right? And so that's a relentless drive that a lot of organizations need. They need people who are going to achieve the mission, achieve the strategy, achieve the objective, knock it out the park. Because in the military mindset, as a superpower, you have no choice. You don't get to just chill and collect your check. Unacceptable. You're going to earn your check because that's how you are built, and that's part of your superpower. The language. I talked about this, and I'm going to talk about it again and again and again. And anytime I talk to military people transitioning, I'm mentoring folks, I'm coaching folks, I talk about this language thing because we don't know. We were raised in a plastic bubble. Outside of the military, sometimes we didn't care what was going on because we are protected in this bubble. This is our community. This is our society. Every base is like its own city. It has its own zip code. So, we grew up in this language. But the words you use shape how others see you. Really. The words you use shape how others see you. And if all you do is speak with the military tongue, then that's all they see. They don't see all the other superpowers that you have. And so all you got to do is some, you know, I say simple substitutions, but it's not simple if you don't know what it is. However, you do need to substitute some of these words. And I want to just show you how you can frame your story to the hiring manager so that they see you from confusing jargon to compelling impact. They're looking at you in the middle of the interview like, I don't know what the heck Reggie talking about. He said all of this stuff. I don't know what that means. AIM 9 missiles and AIM 7s and TP and 20 millimeter and GAL 8 and M61, A1, F-15, 16, T-33s. What the heck is he talking about? Right? You got to translate that so that they know what that means. And each one of you, military, veterans, and spouses, you know what I'm talking about. You have this language. And so stop saying, I was an E7 over 40 personnel and say, I led a team of 40 professionals. I managed a, $2 million MTOE, or I was accountable for $2 million in assets. I executed log pack operations. What the heck does that mean, right? Well, it means I manage complex supply chain operations. I served in an OIF deployment. Everybody know what OIF means, right? I led operations in a high pressure, high stakes environment is what should be on your resume. It should be the verbiage that comes out in your interview. Now, I was in, Operation Enduring Freedom or Operation Iraqi Freedom. No, they want to know I led operations in a high pressure, high stakes environment. Then they may say, okay, what did you do? Explain that. And that's when you get to tell your story. I conducted AAR debriefs. I facilitated performance improvement reviews. Are you catching my drift? This is what you need to do. All right. Your resume should answer one question. And what is that? Bottom line, why should I hire you? Why should I hire you? There are 1,000 people that want this job. 999 people are going to be disappointed. And you want this job. Why should I hire you? You have to answer that question. So they're not hiring your unit. They're not hiring your branch. They're not hiring your title. I was a colonel. I was a chief. I was a master sergeant. I was an ensign. Okay, I hear you. But that's not what they're hiring. Every bullet point, every line, every word on that page should be building a case for your unique value. I want you to look up that too and find out the real meaning of value. And then I want you to think about what's your value, because that's what you have to communicate, your value. They're hiring you because of your value, but they need to know what that value is. And that's your story. Don't tell employers what your title was. Tell them what was your impact. I often used to say to people, Colonel Bullock is what I did, but Reggie B is who I am. Make the distinction between your title and your impact. They know there are a lot of people in leadership positions that may not have done the real leadership work. But when you tell them what your impact was, the results, now they get to see and perceive who you really are. And so stop saying, I only served for 4 years. No, take ownership. I led. I was just enlisted. Oh God, I hate when I hear that, because I was both enlisted and an officer. And people say, well, I'm just enlisted. No, you managed. I want to pause there for a second because, I was coaching even when I was still in the military, and I would have enlisted people come to me and say, well, sir, you're an officer and I'm just enlisted. And I would checkmate them. I'm like, are you sure about that? Yeah, you're an officer, and officers can do this and officers can do that. And I'm enlisted. I said, okay, help me understand this. What does the O stand for in NCO? And they would look at me. I'm like, you smart. You telling me everything else I need to know. So tell me, what does the O stand for in NCO? It stands for officer. So for every NCO that's listening to me right now, don't just say, I was just enlisted. No, you were also an officer. You're a non-commissioned officer. You led, you managed, you supervised, you developed, you improved, you executed, you solved, you coordinated. So I just did this, I just did that. No, don't say that, especially in an interview. You are more than that. And so leadership is not rank, leadership is influence. When I teach leadership, it is about influencing other people to do something they might not normally do. And so the civilian world measures leadership differently than the military. They don't even understand what we understand. They don't go through what we go through. They don't have the rank structure and the discipline requirements to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. For some, they just don't understand. But when you communicate to them, you need to help them to understand who you are. So the rank is gone. You're not, you don't see my rank on this suit, right? Titles are temporary. Like I said, Lieutenant Colonel Bullock is what I did, but Reggie B is who I am. What remains is what makes people follow you, trust you, and work harder because of you. It's influence. Leadership is influence. So when you come on to a team and you're part of an organization, how do you influence people to do the things that they need to do? And that you've been developing that for years. How do you let everybody know, I've been working on me for years. I'm good at this. I can influence people. Trust me. I know what I'm doing. And at that point, that's a value, because often civilians are not trained like you. They don't have your superpowers. But if they don't know what you have, then how are they going to hire you to do that thing? They don't know. And so you led under pressure. I mean, there's so many stories I'm sure you could tell me, including the spouses, how you've led under pressure. Think about it. A spouse has a family. Maybe they don't have children, but they have responsibilities when their military member leaves, goes on deployment. Sometimes they don't know when they're coming back. And so that's a whole different pressure, that your spouse is gone to some far off land and you don't know what they're doing and you can't even talk to them. These are high stakes. Conditions are chaotic at times. And you make decisions to lead people. All right. This is your superpower. You developed people. How many of you educated, trained, developed, mentored, coached people? That's a skill set that a lot of people don't have. And you owned your outcome. You didn't just pass the blame when things went wrong, good or bad. I did that. You own that. That's yours, right? And so that's accountability. And that mindset is transformational in any organization. You'd be surprised how many people shirk their responsibility and don't take accountability for their own responsibility. Catch that? And so you, military members, veterans, spouses, and that's who I'm talking to. I know some of the stuff that I'm saying is applicable to a lot of civilians who have not served, especially first responders. But right now, this is specifically for those people that I'm talking to, military veterans and spouses, because they're the ones that need civilian jobs, who don't understand how to get a civilian job, because for the most part, their culture has not been the civilian world. And that's why I'm doing this. So confidence isn't knowing you'll succeed. No, it's believing you'll grow even if you don't. You're confident in yourself. So, I know I can shoot that ball and I may or may not make it, but I believe that every time I miss, all right, I'm going to come back again and again and again, because I'm good at this. This is who I am. Some of you have served, at least 10 years in the military, and you're confident in what you do. Oh man, there are so many times that I was on that flight line and I was doing things that were just second nature. But it wasn't when I first started as an E3. I had to learn it. So it's not arrogance, it's clarity. A lot of military people are accused of being cocky and arrogant and egotistical, and to some extent, it may be true. But within our own circle, we don't see ourselves that way. No, it's just confidence. We know that we're good. I remember when I used to load an AIM-7 missile onto an F-15 aircraft, and I used to drive a jammer, a J1, J4, or MJ4. And so when you're good, you can put that missile right up in there and almost in the clamp so that the one man, the crew chief, all they got to do is just lock, plug it in, lock it in, and arm that thing. Or if you're not good, it could take you 5 minutes and you got to take it back down and reset and all that other stuff, or you can do it in seconds. There's so many things in the military, in the operational world, where you know that you know. I remember 702s, admin folks, right? Back in the 80s, used to type without looking. They'd be talking to me, typing and doing stuff and chewing bubble gum at the same time. And I'm like, what? They were confident. What's your confidence? And what's your superpower? And are you confident in that? So you've already done the harder things, than finding your next career. I mean, finding your next career, I get it, it's hard, but you've done so many things harder than that. Many, many things harder than that. This is just another mission. So walk in knowing that. Walk in knowing that you've done the hard. Finding another career is just a mission. So every veteran has a story. And I put this up there as a reminder to myself that, I've been around. I've done a lot. I've been with astronauts. I've sat with presidents. I'm a fifth degree martial artist. I got rockets there, 2.75 TP rockets most people never heard of. I was commander. You see the flag there a few times. I'm patriotic. I remember when my children were young and I became an officer. I remember my mother when I came home from basic training in 1982, September, and she was proud of me. All of these things, I'm wearing combat gear, right? And so what's your story? I want you to go back and look at some of your pictures, starting at basic training, officers training school, whatever applies. And look at some of these pictures and remind yourself how far you've come and what you've done. Because as you are being asked questions in the interview, this is your story. So your story is your competitive advantage. It really is. In a stack of 100 resumes, remember I talked about that 1,000 resumes, skills and credentials blur together. What stands out is your story. People don't always remember what you say, but they remember how you make them feel. How did you make them feel when you told them your story? A clear, compelling narrative about who you are, what you've done, and where you're going. You know that, all right? Veterans have some of the most powerful stories in any room. You've seen it. All of a sudden, you get a whole crowd of people around you listening to your story. The challenge isn't having a story, it's owning it without apology. You are that military person. You are that military spouse. You are that veteran. You are the defenders of this United States. Be proud of that. Own that. And so, what do you know? Who do you help? What problem do you solve? This is how you tell your story, your expertise, your skills, your hard-won knowledge are the foundation. We talked about that foundation earlier. Think about all those schools you went through. Military people go through more training than almost anybody on the planet. And the amount of money that it costs to train you is significant. I get it. We got people with associates and bachelors and masters and PhDs. Nothing compared to your millions of dollars of training. You know that you know. And tell that story. And tell it in a way that they understand it in their language. Learn that translation. And define your target employer, industry, your audience. You don't just go everywhere. I want to be a leader out there. Okay, where? Doing what? For who? So, do the intel. Do the intel, get that information. And be more specific. Very specific, really. And more credible. And when that story comes out, and you tell people who you become as a result of your experiences, it'll resonate with them. And every employer has a gap that they're trying to fill. Know what their gap is. Do your intel, do your research, know how your skills are going to close that gap. How are you going to help them? Literally, what problem are you going to solve? Because that's what they're looking at. I'm going to pay you $150,000. All right. What's the value? So, going to an interview. 3 questions that change everything. All right. Before you walk into the interview, before you walk into a networking event or conversation, answer these questions out loud to yourself. Write them down, practice them until they feel natural. Your answers are your brand, who you are. What's your brand? I think I talk about branding in one of my other books. So, what value do I create? You should answer that question, like literally. Write that down. What value do I create? And write that down. Not what your title was, not where you were stationed. What does an organization gain by choosing you? That's the value. Be specific, be bold, be clear, and do it in their language. What problems do I solve? Yeah, you should do your research on that company. So when you go there, you know what problems you're going to solve. Hiring managers hire solutions, not backgrounds. A lot of people have resumes with impressive backgrounds. They're not hiring that. What can you do? What are you going to solve? Identify the real challenges in your target role and position yourself to answer that stuff. You are the answer. You are the answer. They need to see that hiring you is the answer to their challenges, to their problems. And why should they remember me? Hey, what's the one thing you want a hiring manager to say about you after you leave the room? Remember, a lot of times they don't remember everything you said, but they remember how you made them feel. That's the emotional intelligence piece. Craft it deliberately, own it completely, and present it and practice it. Practice it. So here's some lines, power lines that can reframe. And so I'm just putting this out there. You have it now. You can look at it. It's not on your motivational posters. It's a mindset reset, right? How do you speak? Your DD 214 ended your military career, but it did not end your leadership. And so you're not looking for a job. You're looking for a mission, a mission, a mission. When you know what your mission is, you know you got to execute it, and you know you need to succeed. We used to write this thing at the end of the TDYs that go MC, right? Everybody knows what MC stands for. Mission complete. Closing challenge. One promise before you leave, before I end. One promise, all right? It's not a pep talk. It's a challenge. Make this promise before you finish looking at this screen, and then keep it. Never again say, I only served. Never again say, I was just enlisted. Never again diminish what you gave this country. Replace only with ownership. Ownership. That's actually a chapter in one of my books, The Ships. Walk into every interview knowing that you've already led under pressure, solved complex problems, and adapted to uncertainty. You've been there, done that. You are a veteran, not just a veteran in word, a veteran of experiences. And then accomplished missions that most people will never experience. I can't even begin to count my missions and my story. How about you? Know your story, know your missions, and know that the missions you've done, some people could never even stomach that. That's your superpower. That's who you are. You don't need permission to recognize your value. You just need to own it, literally. Again, your service is your superpower. Your service was never your ceiling. It doesn't stop there. It's your foundation. Now, build something extraordinary on your foundation. Never allow your military title to become smaller than your civilian impact. All right? You are that person. They just need to know who you are. This is where, if I was on stage, I would say any questions, concerns, or comments. And then this is my get off the stage slide, because I am a business owner of G-Town LLC, and I've written 5 books. And so this is where I do my sales pitch. Anyway, I want you to get out there and become the best version of yourself every single day. Own your superpower. Translate your military experience and language into civilian experience and language. Let the civilians know your value. I'm Coach Reggie B, retired Lieutenant Colonel Reginald Bullock, saying, get out there and get that job.